Hey, it's Zach over at Feel Free to Argue. Not sure how this is going to work out. I got some stuff on my mind, but it's not really as formed as the thoughts that I usually have. But what I really want to kind of talk about is information management. Especially, we're going to start off talking about information management in the military. And just a couple of things that I've been reading about, or actually watching on the internet recently, that have gotten me thinking about this. First, it was a story that I saw on Democracy Now!, a woman named Lavina Johnson. She was from Louisiana, was killed in Iraq about 3 years ago. The official story was that she committed suicide, but almost the second her father started asking questions, the story started falling apart. And I guess they picked on the wrong guy to do something weird with his daughter, because this guy was not only a doctor, but also a veteran. So as he got more and more information from the autopsy, it became more and more clear that something was up and that the official story was simply not true. I mean, down to like just outright weird things, like the fact that her gloves were glued onto her hands, the fact that the bullet hole where she apparently killed herself was on the left-hand side. He points out that she's right-handed. That, in addition to the fact that it would have been almost impossible for her to get a weapon as large as an M16 positioned appropriately so that she could even make the wound that she was supposed to have made all by herself. There was, and I apologize because this is really gross, but apparently someone had put lye in her vagina. Presumably, the only reason they could think that somebody would be doing this is because someone had raped her and they were trying to get rid of any genetic information that could be later used to implicate themselves. So, they were trying to cover this all up as a suicide, and I think we can all agree that whatever is going on here, that's definitely not a suicide. I mean, the gloves being glued on, I think, is probably the most perfect example of how it absolutely could not be. I mean, why would anyone glue their own gloves on? It certainly couldn't do it after she was dead, so somebody glued those gloves on after she was dead to hide something. But this is like part of a whole troubling trend in terms of how the military controls all the stories, basically, that come out of the front. You have, the stories of, Pat Tillman and Jessica Lynch, and how those were both really, really, changed from the way that they actually occurred, because the military was looking for exciting narratives, in both of those cases, to counteract negative news about the war that was taking place at that time. So they were able, for example, to transform, Pat Tillman's death into this heroic, episode which gave them just the bounce they needed at a time when there was a flurry of criticism about the war. And something that should have added to the criticism of the war instead, became something that worked to counteract some of it. Something which Tillman's family is, of course, very upset about. And you can see more evidence of this in a video that I just did recently, talking about the journalist Zariah, who was an embedded journalist, and how he lost his privileges, basically for doing nothing wrong. I mean, he went through the whole process. He was more than considerate. He's an excellent photographer and journalist, and he really, dotted every I and crossed every T and absolutely did nothing wrong. And just because he produced some stuff that the military didn't like and he refused to take it down, he lost his privileges. That's end of story. Great, war journalist Zariah doesn't get any more access to Iraq We don't get any more stories from him. We don't get the benefit of his insight because he tells the truth. And kind of a related story, this is once again also on Democracy Now!. Amy was introducing a woman named Gina Gray, who was the public affairs director at Arlington National Cemetery. And she was recently fired. And the reason is that she wouldn't go along with this policy that they had of trying to keep the journalists away from the funerals. Now, as far as she could tell, well, she showed up and she was told that there were these regulations that, the journalists had to keep a certain distance away. And she said, she's been in the military long enough. It's like she wanted to know what was going on. She said, okay, so there are these regulations. Show them to me. So I'm clear about them and I can enforce them properly. Well, all of a sudden, they're all doing roddy-doo. Oh, I don't know, some kind of regulation. I'm sure they're around here somewhere. And I started looking around for them. She never got any regulations. And the fact is that there weren't any regulations that were specific to Arlington National Cemetery. Now, there were general Army regulations, and those were the things that she applied. And basically, the Army regulations say that the people, meaning the family members, are totally in control of how much access the media gets and how close they get to be, etc. But because she wouldn't enforce the non-standards, she got into a whole bunch of trouble and eventually ended up losing her job. Now, let's get straight about this. This is not about even the press for me, even though I feel the press, should report on everything. But at this point, I also have respect for the feelings of people who, whose loved ones have just died. So I could give a shit about the press and their right to report on this particular situation. But by the same token, I don't give a damn about the rights of the military wanting to cover up their unpopular war either. So if the family members say that they want to have a reporter standing right next to the grieving widow or the grieving mother, and they don't have a problem with that, and they want that, that's the way that they want their son or daughter remembered, and they feel that's in their wishes, etc., then I think they should get what they want. And I don't see as how the military or the people running Arlington National Cemetery get to have any say in that. They shouldn't have any say in that. But that's getting back to the larger point again. I mean, these are all examples of information management. And it's why you can no longer have any kind of faith in the reporting that you get. Why? Because there's a deliberate attempt to try to hide away the consequences of war from you. Whoever you are, they're trying to hide it from you. Because they're trying to hide it from everybody. They don't want anybody to have an awareness of how bad war really is. And how, serious the consequences are. And how it affects and chains out through a community. About these, wonderful people who are lost. I mean, this woman was it's always these idealists who get into the military that they get into trouble. I mean, this girl who got brutally killed. She was an honor student. She joined the military because she wanted to do something. She thought there were serious problems in the world. She wanted to be part of correcting them. She was an idealist. And as many people who go into the military for, just practical reasons of, wanting to get the GI Bill, get their education paid for, get a leg up, get something that looks good on a resume. There are a lot of, we shouldn't forget that there are people who do it for the most idealistic of reasons. And these people certainly are some of the ones that we betray the most. I mean, Pat Tillman was a perfect example. I mean, most of the speculation runs now that he was, killed by his fellows because he was very upset about us going into Iraq. I mean, he knew it was a wrong move. He knew it had nothing to do with 9/11, and damn it, that's what he was there to fight for, and he was vocal about it. So, just want everybody to keep that in mind, that there are people out there trying to control your perceptions of these events, and they don't want you to get any kind of bad news about the war. They want it to all be some glorious thing where, we're right and they're wrong and everything is simple. But don't trust it.